I'm Susan Euler. You may not have heard of the Ashcan School, but at the turn of the 20th century, they were the height of daring and avant-garde artists, at least in America. In this program, we're going to see how the Ashcan School introduced American audiences to modern European as well as American art. The name Ashcan School is a misnomer. There never was an Ashcan School in the sense of an organized art movement with shared goals and methods of working. Rather, Ashcan is a style. The Ashcan style consists of loose impressionist brushstrokes, but without the pastel impressionist colors. Ashcan colors are dark and somber, in keeping with the artist's favorite subject matter, the urban poor, mainly those living in and around the American cities of New York and Philadelphia at the turn of the 20th century, which is when the style developed. The Ashcan style first gained national attention in 1908, when 8 of the painters associated with it held a group show at the Macbeth Gallery, located on Fifth Avenue in New York City. They called themselves simply the 8. Only 5 of the 8 actually painted in what can be described as an Ashcan style. These artists were Robert Henry and John Sloan, George Lukes and Everett Shinn, and William Glackens. The other 3 men, Maurice Prendergast, Ernest Lawson, and Arthur B. Davies, painted in much brighter colors and did not necessarily choose subjects from the inner city. Nonetheless, they are called Ashcan artists by art historians because they were very active in the larger group and were bound together not by strict adherence to a particular style, but by friendship and a shared dedication to modern art. The 8, as well as others associated with the Ashcan style, were educated and well-trained professionals. Many had attended leading art schools, including the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts in Philadelphia, where a number of them had met. Most had traveled extensively in Europe, especially in France, before returning to the United States to begin their careers as artists. Robert Henry, the group's driving force, studied at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, where he was a student of realist painter Thomas Anschutz, who himself had been a student of Thomas Eakins. Eakins, a professor at the Academy, had shocked the establishment in the 1880s by his then controversial teaching methods, which included using photographs as drawing aids and using live nude models instead of plaster casts in drawing classes. Most shockingly, Eakins was an outspoken advocate for admitting women to art schools where they could study alongside of men. He was eventually fired from his teaching job at the Academy in 1886 for removing a loincloth from a male model during a drawing class in which ladies were present. Thomas Eakins was a role model for the next generation of painters, men such as Everett Shinn, Robert Henry, John Sloan, and the others associated with the Ashcan style. Like Eakins, these artists also wanted to challenge the way art was taught and exhibited in America. In fact, this had been the reason behind the show at the Macbeth Gallery in 1908, which had introduced the 8 to a wider American audience. The show was very successful, and after it closed in New York, John Sloan arranged for it to tour to 7 more cities, including Chicago and Cincinnati, where it drew large and enthusiastic crowds. One Ohio newspaper ran a headline that read, "Big sensation at art museum." And so it was. Ashcan art was a hit, and sales and opportunities for additional shows greatly increased. You sometimes hear that wealthy Americans hated Ashcan art and made fun of it. Not true. The artwork struck a chord with American audiences of all social classes. The subject matter and the style were exactly right for the times. However, the name Ashcan was given to the style in 1915 by a negative critic who, after seeing a drawing by George Bellows entitled Disappointments of the Ashcan, decided that this was a good way to describe the entire style. Ah well, you can't please everyone. Incidentally, Ashcans are what we call today garbage cans. Although they certainly did paint garbage cans and the inner city poor, Ashcan artists did not portray their subjects as downtrodden or hopeless. Rather, the people living in the inner city, many of them newly arrived immigrants, are depicted as vigorous and hardworking, vital contributors to a new, modern American way of life. Their smiles and positive attitudes are infectious. This won the approval of heiress and generous art patron Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney, who in 1911 sponsored a major exhibit of modern American art in the Madison Gallery in New York. The Association of American Painters and Sculptors grew out of this very successful show. Of course, all the 8 became members. One additional member that might surprise you was Gutzon Borglund, the sculptor who created the portraits on Mount Rushmore. So now let's take a look at the Armory Show, a landmark exhibit of modern art that really set a lot of Americans' teeth on edge. Arthur B. Davies, a member of the 8 who did not paint in the Ashcan style, was elected president of the newly formed Association of American Painters and Sculptors. In the summer of 1912, he received a catalog from a large and comprehensive show of modern art being held in Germany. Flush with the recent success of their own shows, Davies and another artist, Walt Kuhn, rushed to Europe and furiously set about contacting artists and galleries in order to mount an exhibition of modern art in New York similar to the one in Germany. The resulting show opened on February 17, 1913. Officially, it was called the International Exhibition of Modern Art, but it became known as the Armory Show. The Armory Show, which was held in the 69th Army Regiment building on Lexington Avenue, was greeted with much fanfare and excitement by both artists and the public. 4,000 guests attended the opening gala. In his welcoming speech, John Quinn, prominent Irish-American lawyer and art patron, exclaimed, "The members of the American Association of Painters and Sculptors have shown you that American artists, young American artists that is, do not dread and have no need to dread the ideas or the culture of Europe. They believe that in the domain of art, only the best should rule. This exhibition will be epic-making." True, but not exactly as Quinn and the other organizers had envisioned. American audiences had thought they were pretty sophisticated in their appreciation of modern art. After all, hadn't they enthusiastically accepted the Ashcan's bold depictions of immigrants and inner-city life? But this European stuff was different, particularly Cubism and Futurism. It didn't look real. It was confusing. Condemned as degenerate, insane, lurid, and not fit for American eyes, the Armory Show made headlines day after day. The most talked about work was Nude Descending a Staircase by Marcel Duchamp, called Rude Descending a Staircase, Explosion in the Shingle Factory, and Rush Hour in the Subway, among other things. This work came to stand for everything that was bad and shocking about modern art. And American artists such as Arthur B. Davies, who defended it and began including Cubist elements in their own paintings, found themselves condemned as un-American, seduced away from good American values by the decadence of Europe. A line had been drawn. On one side were the people who believed that real American art was realistic and, like the Ashcan style, depicted things that could be easily recognized and understood. In the 1920s and 30s, this style became known as American scene painting. On the other side were the modernists. These artists adapted the abstract styles of Europe, but used them, or so they argued, in a uniquely American way. The debate over what was American art and what was just modernist dirt, to quote Thomas Hart Benton, raged on until the 1950s. And echoes of that debate, one that began over 100 years ago at the Armory Show, can still be heard today. With a 10-minute professor, this is Susan Ray Euler. Thanks for tuning in, and make sure you watch our next program.